Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. It's so wonderful to be here with you tonight. Let's begin by setting the most excellent motivation in the universe. As we've said so many times, Arya Nagarjuna calls this motivation the highest motivation of the Mahayana, the highest ideal of the Mahayana practices. We know it's the entrance into the Mahayana. And because this is a Mahayana teaching that we're giving, fortunately, tonight we're beginning the teaching on equalizing and exchanging self with others. We've finished the instruction on the 7-point cause and effect that we went over for a year with so many extensive commentaries to learn different tricks that could help us to learn to actually generate this mind that would be so wild if we actually generated it, called bodhicitta, this mind that day and night wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we learned how we could generate that mind in dependence upon the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya and Arya Sangha and so forth, down through the extensive deeds lineage, through Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha and various other incredible masters that then eventually get to our specific teachers that have given this instructions, and they've so generously given us these teachings, and these incredible Indian pandits and the incredible Tibetan commentators have ornamented Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings on the 7-point cause and effect instruction so beautifully that I feel that we did a good job at looking at, if we actually practiced it, if we actually got into these steps, how one could become a bodhisattva in dependence upon this technique called the 7-point cause and effect. So again, now we start the second technique for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. That's called equalizing and exchanging self with others. And that's a practice that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Arya Manjushri and Arya Nagarjuna. And then we, see Bodhisattva Shantideva being, one of the main sources. And when we look at the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it follows the explanation of the, according to the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life in terms of quotations and so forth, in order to explain the section on equalizing and exchanging self with others in the great treatise. So we're, of course, going to look at, Bodhisattva Shantideva's incredible text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, but we're also going to start, by looking at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and then we'll see the rain of all of the instructions that will fall from there, going backwards into the Indian pandits and back, like Bodhisattva Shantideva and Arya Nagarjuna, and then backwards to Buddha Shakyamuni, and then, forwards past the Nalanda pandits into the Tibetan masters that have such illustrious explanations that we find on mind training in so many different categories. In the Guru Yoga practices, we find a lot of mind training explanation, and the Mahamudra practices, just across the board. And we know in the precious fifth Dalai Lama, the great Ngawan Lozan Gyatso, the great fifth's text called the, spoken words of Manjushri, we know that it says that, everything that is in Bodhisattva Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life in terms of generating bodhicitta is in the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So there's been no discrepancy, but there are nuances for particular students who have particular aptitudes that the equalizing and exchanging self with others instruction is more appropriate for or better suited for. And then there are explanations about, which I won't get into too much of, just about the reason why, the 7-point cause and effect was more prevalent in terms of public teachings, and the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice was more of a secret teaching, but the meaning of secret is explained in different ways by different lamas. So I won't get into that at this point, but just know that, rejoice in the fact that today we're going to begin a deep dive. And you know how I deep dive. I look for everything and try to share it, because the main goal of these teachings is to try to move my mind closer to a place where I can somehow generate, a virtuous attitude every moment, so that my mind is, having virtuous imprints, planted in it every single moment that I'm being. And at this point, it doesn't do that because I haven't practiced enough. I haven't familiarized myself enough. But what we'll learn from Bodhisattva Shantideva is that nothing becomes more difficult with practice, and everything becomes easier with practice. And when we start to learn about cherishing others, it's very difficult because we're obsessed with cherishing ourselves, addicted to cherishing ourselves. But the more we become familiarized with what actually tallies with reality, our mind looses, and that addiction can be cured, and can be cured forever. The addiction to ourselves being the most important thing in the universe. And like any addiction, a lot of times there's a relapse. And that's why we have these practices, to keep refining our minds so that we eventually don't have a relapse back into the self-cherishing attitude. And eventually we won't even have a relapse back into things appearing as truly existent once we become a Buddha. But that's a long ways away from where I am. But to get to the long way away, I have to do the things that are required to get there. If I want to drive somewhere, I have to go down all of the roads that are necessary to get there. I have to have a car that will endure the journey, and I have to know how to drive it or have a driver with the aptitude. So there's a lot of things involved in just getting somewhere, as we would all agree. This isn't just like a spiritual conversation. If you want to get somewhere, there's a lot of things involved. If I want to get somewhere that's the most sophisticated place to get to, which is from a place where my mind is at to a place of Buddhahood, then I'm going to need a sophisticated kind of pathway, sophisticated hardware, sophisticated software, sophisticated everything in terms of my mind and the stuff going in my mind, and a kind of a more sophistication in my effort, and in what I do in every moment with that effort, and where I'm accessing things at a coarse level or a subtle level. All of these things become more and more subtle and more sophisticated as I create the causes for the result of that sophistication. So this equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, with the other practice that we talked about, we had 7 causes and 1 result, but there was a pre-step that we talked about, which was equanimity. And this practice has 9 steps, which we'll say are, 8 causes and 1 result. So we'll get into that. So just rejoice, be so happy that we're learning an instruction passed down to me from various masters. I've received teachings on Lojong from Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, from Geshe Lobsang Gonpo Rinpoche, from Khensur Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche. I've received teachings on Lojong. From Umse Geshe Agha, I've received teachings on Lojong, mind training, equalizing, exchanging self with others. When I say Lojong, means mind training. And this is where we find these practices. And from the great Geshe Dorji Damdul, I've received teachings on mind training. From Geshe the Pema, I received these teachings on the Lojong teachings, the Pema Dawa. So we're really fortunate to have an unbroken lineage that goes back to Buddha Shakyamuni, from us going through Tibetan lineages, and then through the Profound View lineage, and then, through masters like Bodhisattva Shantideva and Arya Nagarjuna and Arya Manjushri, and then to Buddha Shakyamuni. I mean, we couldn't be more impressive in terms of our lineage, in terms of our, what do they call it? Petticoat, what is it? I don't know. They call it something like in terms of our, our spiritual lineage, our spiritual family. We couldn't be, it couldn't be more impressive. I'm not impressive yet, but I know that I can become impressive just like the beings that we imagine in the space in front of us, because I have the recipe that they have and had in order to become beings that are so impressive. So yeah, with that being said, let's set that motivation if we can, to imagine that, the most important thing to me is to figure out how to become the happiest being in the universe, the most reliable guide in the universe. And those 2 things mean the same thing. The best helper in the universe, the happiest being in the universe, those 2 things mean the same thing. And this is what we learn when we study mind training, when we study the 7-point cause and effect, or equalizing, exchanging self with others. We come to find out that when we cherish others, we can come to have the highest amount of happiness. And in dependence upon having the greatest amount of compassion for others, we can have the greatest amount of happiness. In dependence upon having the greatest amount of love for others, we can have the highest amount of happiness. And we can have the most expansive, greatest amount of happiness in dependence upon the number of objects of observation of our love and compassion that there are. And if we have every single sentient being in the universe being objects of observation of our great compassion and love, then this means that if in dependence upon us having love and compassion, we find examples in our own lives when we have great love or great compassion, where we felt the best we've ever felt, if we could feel the best we've ever felt and multiply that times every single sentient beings in the universe, that would be how the Buddha would feel. And we could never imagine such a thing because we couldn't even locate such beings. So it starts to make sense. I was explaining this to some folks that are new to philosophy and explaining it in terms of the kind of idea that when a parent has a child, at that moment when the child is born and they're looking at this thing that most of us would say is pretty disgusting looking, they say, oh, it's so beautiful. And it's the most like blissful moment that a mother and father tend to talk about in their lives. And I recently tested it on a mother, and the daughter was there, and asked the question, what's the highest amount of happiness or bliss you ever experienced? And she answered, when I had the birth of my child, who was sitting right there. And I got the chills because I'd heard this more than once. And I noticed that even though the mother is looking at something that we would all see as disgusting, that can't do anything for her, there is a moment where the self-cherishing attitude is lifted, and for a moment there's an idea that's as close as we can get without bodhicitta, right? As close as we can get. There's an idea that I would do anything for this being. This being's needs are more important than my own. This being is someone that I find, I find so lovable. So there's this feeling that occurs that is a kind of bliss that we don't normally experience. And this is the secret recipe that a mother can see something that has nothing to offer, that's only going to probably bring a lot of trouble for her, not sleeping a whole lot, kind of, soreness that's going to go on from post-surgery and the soreness of carrying the baby and so forth. This thing is going to cause a lot of heartache and pain for the mother, right? So like, it's almost like an enemy, right? In some ways, think about it. This dirty, disgusting thing that's dirtier than someone on the streets, you would be like, oh gosh, some people, oh gosh. Dirtier and more disgusting than that, covered in slime, covered in afterbirth, and just this thing that's now come into the world that's going to be a source of a lot of problems. But somehow in that moment, all of that's not the thought. It's only, I love you, and I want you to be free from suffering, and I want you to be happy. What can I do? What can I do to make that happen? And somehow in that midst of what can I do to make that happen, there's more bliss than anyone's ever had. So why don't we learn how to make, like, whatever that experience is happen in our minds when we look at every single sentient being in the universe? When we're at the grocery store, imagine if you could look over across to a stranger and feel that feeling. And feel it, really feel it. Not need to make it up, not need to like, oh, I should be thinking like this. Have it just spontaneously arise. Oh my word. Yeah, have it just spontaneously arise. I see you as someone I care about. And you can even combine these teachings, of course, and we'll do that after this is all done. And it becomes like an atomic bomb against all of our negative emotions. There's nothing stronger in the universe, Bodhisattva Shantideva says, that's a virtuous thing that we can generate and think like, then that accumulates just vast amounts of merit and gets rid of vast amounts of negativities than this Bodhisattva's ideal. Bodhicitta, the mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, wishes to achieve the highest enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. The conclusion is for the sake of everyone else before your own needs. It's kind of a strange thing that you conclude. And a byproduct is that you are the happiest person in the world. But this conclusion gets you to a place where you're no longer doing this to be the happiest person in the world. You're no longer doing this to be liberated. You've already known you can just be liberated if you've studied the medium scope, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So you're already over that. You're already just working towards like how to become the most reliable guide who has somehow achieved his or her own needs simultaneously with achieving all sentient beings' needs. And the only way that achievement happens is by putting every single sentient being in the universe. If there were a zillion, whatever that number is, I don't know, humans, beings in the universe, right? To be able to connect in that way would just be something else, wouldn't it? So let's just to say, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm attending this teaching so that my mind day and night just has the intention to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. If day and night that's all I thought about, I wouldn't engage in non-virtue, because I would have learned like abandon evil comes with renunciation in the medium scope. But those gaining perfect virtuous actions can only be perfected, virtue can only be perfected if it's combined with this highest ideal of the Mahayana. The only way you can become a perfect being is if your understanding of the nature of reality is combined with this highest ideal of the Mahayana. And this is why it's just so important that we understand how to make it happen. And during these troubled times, it's so important that we have this medicine for our own mind so that we can say that just because I disagree with you or just because I see what you're doing as repulsive, that gives me no excuse to not love you. That gives me no excuse not to day and night wish that you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And we will learn that gives me no excuse to say that I'll take it upon myself to make sure that you're free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How? By becoming a Buddha. And when I become a Buddha, I'll really know how to help you. But in the meantime, I'm going to try all of these ways to help you that don't involve cherishing myself and hurting you because I feel that I'm the most important person in the face of this earth. And anything that dents this precious me, even if I'm in the wrong, is something that I need to push away as fast as possible. And that's my self-cherishing attitude that loves to accumulate misdeeds, that loves to not abandon evil. Yeah. So I'm attending this teaching so I can generate bodhicitta, so that I can learn what emptiness means, so that I can become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama said, if you're my student, there's two things that I'd like you to become familiar with, and that's compassion, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So these are two indispensable things that we must know. We must know it if we want to achieve what we deserve. And that's the highest enlightenment. Why do we deserve that? Because we can get that. And our minds are in the nature of clear light and unsullied, and the stains are adventitious. So our minds we don't deserve to be so abused by wrong view. We don't deserve to be so abused by the self-cherishing attitude that we think is our friend. Because our mind is naturally a peaceful one. It's not an agitated mind. But that lovely self-grasping ignorance gives rise to mental factors that disturb our mind. And that self-grasping ignorance is a mental factor that disturbs our mind. We just don't notice it. Yeah. But we have these teachings to learn how to undisturb our mind and how to get our minds to the place where there's no longer afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. And the only way to do that is to understand emptiness and unite that liberating path called emptiness with the ripening path called bodhicitta, the path of method. And then we would say the ripening paths of bodhicitta, renunciation, concentration, the ripening paths like ethics, generosity, patience, effort, concentration, things like this. Those ripening paths of aspirations and skillful means and power, these kinds of ripening paths, and knowing what to say, when to say it, how to say it, who to say it to, those kind of ripening paths for illusory-like sentient beings that we must have illusory-like compassion for as illusory-like persons. in this illusory like samsara that functions just fine, and that in this illusory like situation that we're in, virtue causes happiness and non-virtue causes suffering. Illusory like virtue causes illusory like happiness, and illusory like non-virtue causes illusory like suffering. And even though it's illusory like, it is not an illusion because it actually exists. It just doesn't exist in the way that we think that it does. None of these practices, none of this world, none of our friends, none of ourselves, not that dog over there, nothing exists the way that we think that it does. It exists in a mode that is different from the way that we experience it, from the way that it appears to us, from the way that we apprehend it. And we have to fix that. We also have to fix the fact that we think that we're the most important beings in the universe, and we're the ones that we need to take care of, and everyone else is secondary. And if you get in my way of taking care of myself, I will harm you somehow. I will harm you somehow. We need to get away from that, because the root of non-harm is compassion. The root of non-violence, ahimsa, is compassion when you study the mental factors. We have to get rid of that. Ethics is abandoning harm and the sources of harm, according to the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and the section on perfection of ethics. We have to look at these things if we want to get anywhere on this path. We want it to feel like something that matters. We want to change, really. If we just want to hang around and hear these things so that we can say that we've done something, that's fine too. Yeah, I can say that I watched Jeopardy. I can say that I did this. I can say that I've had Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. Yeah, I can say this. I can say I've been here. I can say I've been there. But all of those things are the bait that just keeps me coming back to the hell realms and the hungry ghost realms and the animal realms, because humans, for the most part, and I'm a human, are involved, and I think I'm special. And here's the problem: I'm not. Humans, for the most part, are involved in the ignoble. Therefore, most ordinary beings go to the lower realms, according to Arya Davis' 400 verses. So we must do something, because this is a flash of lightning. Not just our virtuous deeds are a flash of lightning, and then they're gone, and then it's dark most of the time, in our minds of non-virtue. Well, this life is like that. And all these plans and designs that we think are so important, death will come and nothing can stop it. We don't know when we're going to die, and the only thing that can help us is Dharma. And the beings that know that are the beings that we imagine in the merit field. So let's imagine the merit field in the space in front of us. Imagine that all of the enlightened beings are there: the extensive deeds lineage, the profound view lineage, the lineage of blessings, all those incredible masters in the Pali tradition, Theravada tradition, the Sanskrit tradition, the Dharmagupta tradition, and the Mulasarvastavada tradition. Imagine all of these holy beings, the Nalanda Pandits, Vikramadashila, all of these incredible Pandits. We're so fortunate. We're fortunate, aren't we? Yeah. Imagine all the Tibetan masters, Nyingma Kagyu, Sakya Galup, all these incredible masters in the space in front of you. We've mentioned their names so many times. Imagine them there. All of the commentators that we'll be so blessed to hear from, imagine that they're right there, rejoicing in the fact that we're reading their texts. They only wrote these texts because they want us to be free from suffering, and they want us to have the highest amount of happiness possible. That's the only reason they've read them. So just imagine these beings who are in the space in front of us are just so delighted that we're engaging in this practice, because their sole purpose was because they learned, they figured out what we haven't figured out yet. That cherishing others is the way to happiness, and that others are more important than them. And this is the key to success, full mental success. So we're here doing exactly what these incredible beings came to try to convince us in so many skillful ways to do. And we don't even know how the enlightened activities are occurring in our life right now. We don't know who is a Buddha. We don't know who is a Bodhisattva. We don't know who is just acting for our sake. And seemingly they're not, but they're really acting for our sake. And we'll learn this about Bodhisattva Shantideva when we read his story about his life. we'll learn that we can't trust our eyes. We can't trust what we see when we think somebody's this or somebody's that. They may be someone very, very deeply realized internally, and we don't know this. We can only judge our own minds. And Acharya Dharmakirti, makes this very clear. We really only know our own minds. Don't try to say, oh, this person's this or that person's that. And if one of the greatest negativities is being angry at a bodhisattva or harsh words at a bodhisattva, and we don't know who's who, we're so limited, we're so wrong about everything. Wow, we better be really super careful, really super careful. And the reason that we call this a secret practice at times is because the practitioners who do it keep it secret. It says in the Lojong teachings, in the mind training teachings, be a normal person on the outside and a yogi within. So if there's folks walking around being normal on the outside and yogis within, we have to be very careful when we're interacting with people. We don't know who's who, and maybe they're acting a little strange. We really have to try to discriminate it in a way and know that, okay, if I react negatively, I'm going to get non-virtue, and have a little patience, remain like a piece of wood, and then say, hey, this person could very likely be appearing in one way and actually be another. Everything in my life is appearing one way and actually another. Why couldn't there just be another thing that's just appearing in one way and actually another? And when I've seen great stories of great masters, they appear in one way and they're actually another. When I read about the Mahasiddhi Talopa, and I read about the Mahasiddhi Marpa, Lotsawa Marpa, appearing one way and being another. And I read about all of these stories that we really have to be so careful. When Jetsun Milarepa went to go see Lotsawa Marpa, he was asking around, does anyone know where the Great Marpa is? And someone said, well, I know where Marpa is over there, but I don't know any great Marpas around here. The person that Jetsun Milarepa in the beginning of all his texts, usually prostrated to. Jetsun Milarepa, the Buddha in one lifetime. So we must know this and be so careful. Imagining those beings in the space in front of us that we connect with, we know that have gotten rid of those problems that we want to get rid of, just as our guides, as a kind of voice of reason in our life through their texts, books that they've written, or their text if they're texting you. Sometimes lamas are texting you, or in person when you're with them. However you're able to connect with these teachers in our lives, in your life. So just imagine these great beings are in the space in front of you. His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, Buddha Shakyamuni, all these incredibly enlightened beings. Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche. I won't list any, just imagine these beings are here. Every single one of them. All in the space in front of us, all surrounding. On every atom, there's Buddha fields, as it says in the Sanche Mulam. Now, we said it, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. When we become Buddhas, we'll do exactly what the beings who are in the space in front of us do. We'll ripen sentient beings. We'll try to connect with every single sentient being in the universe in order to help them realize what we will have realized. The only way that we can get to that state that they're in, is by realizing that this is possible, by starting to make our mind work more like that, and by creating all of the causes for the ripening results of the 32 major marks, the 80 minor marks, and the perfect wisdom of the mind and the perfect caring for others of the mind. These are all created through our practice that we're doing right now. There's no other way to create a mental basis than to create a mental basis that is ready for a mind like this. And, the mental basis of seeing the excellent qualities of the Buddhas and willingness to endure hardships, having great compassion for all of the sentient beings, really, really setting our minds and trying to saturate them with this idea. So let's just imagine that we connect with every single being in the universe and invite them here to be our guests in order for them to enjoy these teachings. And when I say enjoy, let's imagine that there's a feeling of joy, joyous effort that we all have when we're receiving these teaching, and imagine that we're rejoicing in the fact that all of these sentient beings are here. We're creating another layer of virtue within our mind. We're rejoicing in the fact that we've brought them all here, that we're thinking about good things. We're rejoicing in the fact that they're all here. All the hell-hungry ghost, animal, human demigods and gods are here, and they've stopped their suffering for long enough to be able to hear these teachings, to be able to know exactly what they need to do in order to eject from cyclic existence, and not only eject from cyclic existence in the terms of an abiding nirvana and the lesser vehicle liberation, but be able to eject from cyclic existence as a fully enlightened Buddha. That is really something that we're trying to aim at. So imagine you bring every single sentient being in the universe who's ready to hear the great vehicle doctrine. We're imagining they're all brought here, and imagining they're ready to hear this. And we know that, like we're saying, like, may they be able to be taught in all the languages that exist, meaning may they be able to understand what I'm saying in their own language. May the meaning that I'm saying meet with their aptitude. So imagine that, like, a Buddha can utter one word and it'll go answer things in different ways to different people based on their aptitudes. Imagining these teachings are going like that. The more we can imagine the great qualities we'll eventually have, the 32 major marks, the 80 minor marks, the 60 melodious qualities of speech, the ability to emanate bodies as an enjoyment body and as an emanation body, to abide with the Arya Bodhisattvas and teach the Mahayana doctrine and stay there until samsara ends. Really, really, with these incredible marks of the Buddha, and staying in this place, the Akanishta, in the Ugmin, Pure Land, Akanishta Pure Land, and then also being able to help beings who aren't Arya Bodhisattvas like me, maybe be my postal worker, what are the mail person, coming and maybe is just waiting for the right moment for me to walk down and say just what I need to hear in order to move closer to Buddhahood. If we operate like our world is really about us, this whole world is just like a playground to learn how to become enlightened, changes things a little bit. We're just using everything around us to try to become Buddhas. We're using every circumstance. We're using everything we touch. We're using the tactile sensations to see how, wow, this is appearing to feel from a tactile perspective inherently existent. We're always talking about inherent existence related to, that looks inherently existent. It appears that way. How about this feels inherently existent? Literally, there's a tactile sensation that's non-conceptual. That has an appearance of true existence that's happening to this way this feels. Weird, right? There's something that in that appearance of that sound to my ear consciousness, the apprehension of that sound by my ear consciousness has the appearance of intrinsic existence. Weird. It's appearing. My ear consciousness has an appearance of intrinsic existence when it hears a sound. That sound appears. Usually we use this word appear like to my eyes, but we have to kind of shift the way we understand appear. Like a smell is appearing to my nose and I'm taking it in, and it's appearing to be intrinsically existent. And then I say, that smells good. My mind just gives in and says, oh, I apprehend it as intrinsically existent because it appeared that way. Why wouldn't I? We've got a lot to undo. We have a lot to undo, and it takes some undoing to undo it. But if we don't start undoing, it won't be undone. And do we want to be undone? Because undone is samsara. Undone is birth, aging, sickness, and death, meeting with the unpleasant, being separated from the pleasant, not getting what you want, the suffering of the appropriated aggregates, the uncertainty of cyclic existence, being reborn again and again, never being satiated, going from the high to the low realms, shucking off bodies, and not having any friends when you die to go with you. Suffering change and the pervasive compounded suffering, These are the things that we know about cyclic existence. If you like them, don't unravel these things. If you do not like them, if you do not like having those things you care about ripped from your life over and over again, if you don't like the fact that everything that comes together will come apart, if you don't like that, then we have to do this. We have to unravel this. We have to figure out how to become unbound from cyclic existence and unbound from the self-cherishing attitude at its subtlest level if we want our highest achievement. So let's imagine we bring every single sentient being here for them to be able to enjoy these teachings, joyously enjoy them, rejoice in the fact that we're all doing this. This is very rare. 8 billion human beings. Humans we're only talking about. Think about insects. Think about beings in general. Think about the fish, goldfish. Think about just think about all the lobsters, just alone, that are in tanks waiting to be boiled. Think about it. It's real. And those beings that are in a tank think, I'm Mr. Lobster, just like you're thinking, like I'm whoever, I'm Joe, I'm Mark, I'm Jeff, I'm Cindy, I'm Lori, I'm Natalie. Just like you're thinking like that, there's not as a sophisticated way of going about thinking, but they're thinking, I'm Mr. Lobster, whatever way that they're appearing to themselves as Mr. Lobster, and they're saying, yeah, I'm Mr. Lobster. Yeah, and I'm Mr. Lobster that intrinsically am Mr. Lobster, and this is in the intrinsic ocean that I live in. It's really dark down, intrinsically dark down here, and it's very intrinsically lonely. Oh, what's that? That's something I like to eat. Now I'm intrinsically caught in a trap. Wow, who are all these folks around me throwing me around? And this thing, you don't have names for these things, but everything's appearing intrinsically existent, and you're conceiving them to be intrinsically existent without even being able to name it. We feel like, oh, it's the name that's making us all crazy. It's just the name. No, the lobster's conceptually apprehending things as intrinsically existent, just like we are. I and mine. I am lobster. I am intrinsically existent lobster. When we think like that, and we think that the only reason that that being is about to be boiled in a pot that was my mother, is because grasping at true existence, grasping at a mode of existence that doesn't exist, misapprehending reality, believing that this intrinsically exists, believing that I and you and crutches and banjos and giraffes and dinosaurs intrinsically exist. May this evil demon called self-grasping ignorance be struck with the arrow of wisdom. May it just be removed from my mind through these studies. May the self-cherishing attitude be destroyed. These are my enemies. There's no enemies really except these. My self-grasping ignorance and my self-cherishing attitude. These are my only enemies. And the more we get caught up in the blah, 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 we are not fighting those two real enemies. We're making new enemies. We're making the only thing that could cause another cancer to come, or another yelling person to come, or another person to cut us off come, or another fill in the blanks person to cheat us on some sort of repair. Get angry. If you like being cheated, get angry, respond, and you've just set up opportunity to be cheated 10 more times in the future. Hopefully you'll be cheated really quickly because of the magnification of karma, so you don't have to be cheated 100 times to 1. These are the stakes. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't Harry Potter. This is real. And meditate enough, study enough of this, and come to that conclusion. Don't just believe me, because I seem really fired up about this stuff. Believe what you'll discover by looking at what I've looked at. And if you look at what I've looked at over the last 30 years, there's a case that's built that's locked so sealed tight by Lama Tsongkhapa, like the best lawyer I've ever read. So convincing, and not convincing like with trickery, convincing like, hey, you think about this and you see if this makes sense for yourself. So convincing. Everybody's here now, enlightened beings, all sentient beings. Now let's imagine that the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, where the Buddha taught the definitive truth, the truth of suchness, the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality. When Madhyamika Prasangika, ultimate reality is the definitive teaching. There doesn't have to be any other qualification. It doesn't have to, be taken right at face value. It just has to be a teaching on emptiness, on ultimate reality. And this Heart Sutra is the definitive teaching. We don't have to add anything onto it. The Buddha meant what he said. He meant that everything here is empty of intrinsic existence. The word no, the word self, is talking about, when it says self, it means intrinsically existent self. So when it says no, it means there's no intrinsically existent self. It doesn't say, because the Buddha told us that he's saying the five skandhas are empty of nature. The Buddha didn't say the five skandhas don't exist. That's an easy word to use. Don't exist. The eyes don't exist. He would just say that. He is really saying something very specific, and this is taught in a sharp way. This is the short perfection of wisdom. So there wasn't a need for the Buddha to write so many words, because he already told us he meant like things don't have intrinsic existence. They're empty of nature. They're empty of inherent existence. So there was no need for the Buddha to keep saying it over and over again, because this is a condensed sutra. There's nothing to interpret. It's just for smart people to see this is a condensed sutra. The Buddha just means what he said. And the first and third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha didn't mean everything that he said according to Prasangika view, but the Buddha meant everything that he said during this second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And hidden within it, we find the kind of ripening paths that one traverses in order to see emptiness again and again and again and again and again, the conventional paths, because form is empty, but emptiness also is form. So hidden within it, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, hidden within that mantra alone, we find the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. And then one can explain the entire Heart Sutra according to the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and no more learning. So the whole Heart Sutra has hidden within it the five paths. The mantra has hidden within it the five paths. And explicitly, the Heart Sutra is teaching the emptiness of intrinsic existence. And this mantra is empty of intrinsic existence. There is no intrinsically existent path of accumulation, no intrinsically existent path of preparation, no intrinsically existent path of seeing, no intrinsically existent path of meditation, and no intrinsically existent no more learning. There's no intrinsically existent Buddhahood. This is what the Buddha came to tell us. And our belief that things do intrinsically exist makes us crazy, makes us think things are intrinsically attractive or intrinsically awful. And then we are intrinsically, we think that it makes sense to be drawn towards or push away things because they have this nature that we're so sure of that they don't have. We're not saying there's not good and there's not bad. We're just saying that there's a mode of existence that doesn't exist that we think that it does. We think that things aren't merely imputed in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. We think that from the basis of designation, from the side of the object, all of the parts and stuff, there's a whole that's over there, like a car or like a donkey. There's a whole that's over there that really intrinsically is what I think, like this, this name I'm coming up with for it, and that hole over there. I feel like I'm just putting a sticker on it that's just giving it the right name for what it really, really is. Like, oh, let me get this sticker out of my mind and put it on the donkey. That's that, because that's like a donkey over there. That donkey intrinsically exists over there. I don't have anything to do with, from my sphere, that's a donkey within my sphere of convention. I'm just putting something on the donkey in terms of a label, like a sticker, because it's over there from its own side and it doesn't have anything to do with me, in terms of like imputing it as a being that's in the animal realm and that blah, 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 that can carry things, that, is a slang for somebody who is like, has to work too hard. Like, yeah, we just make up all of this stuff and then we say, this is real. And I must have that. And then when we get that, we get bored with it, and I must have two, or this thing's old and I must have that. But I thought you said I must have that because that was intrinsically good. Well, it was intrinsically good, but now it's not intrinsically good. And I'm willing to like be so crazy that I think those two things can make sense. That's intrinsically the best thing that I've ever had, and it'll make me happy. Man, I got to get rid of this thing that I thought was intrinsically the best thing that I could ever have that was going to make me happy because it makes me so unhappy. It intrinsically stinks now. How is something intrinsic doesn't change? It stays the way that it is. How could that flower be so awful to some people, and they get that allergy, they see it, they just want to like run. And some people like want to hold it next to them. They love the flower so much. What is that? Why is that so possible? Why is it so possible? Because things don't have intrinsic existence. And this is what we have to come to find out through lots of years of study and systematic studies going through the various layers of understandings of selflessness that we find in the tenet systems, not trying to jump right to Madhyamaka Prasangika tenet system because we feel like, oh, we're fancy, we're really smart, we're educated, we already had a Western education, so we needn't go start with these like lower things that I think younger people may need, or maybe people who aren't as educated need. And then we come to think that we can understand the Prasangika view, but we don't really even understand what like a permanent unitary independent self is, and like how to get rid of the idea that there's not an autonomous substantial self of person. Like we don't even like come to understand like the lower kind of beginning levels of selflessness that are required for us to get to the final understanding of selflessness that this Heart Sutra is teaching. The Heart Sutra is teaching the selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. And as we go through the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamantra, and Madhyamaka systems, we'll find that a more sophisticated understanding of what selflessness is occurs. And in the lower schools, we really are only focused on the selflessness of person. There's arguments because permanent phenomena are considered imputed in the Sautrantika school, that the beginning of imputation related to phenomena occurs. But really, for all intensive purposes, we say that really the Sautrantika Vaibhashika school only focuses on the selflessness of person. And then when we get to the mind only and Madhyamaka school, of course, we begin to focus on the selflessness of phenomena. And we don't end up getting to the lack of intrinsic existence of all phenomena conventionally and ultimately until we get to the Prasangika view. Every single one of the views all the way up to Prasangika is still holding on to something, still looking through a glass at the nature of reality. Because there's still something that's impeding the direct perception, the non-dualistic direct perception of emptiness, where it becomes like water poured into water. This non-dual direct perception of emptiness can't occur if there's any kind of grasping. One has to know the exact object of negation in order to see emptiness. And one can't see emptiness directly until one has the Prasangika view, because there's no direct perception of emptiness in terms of like the path of seeing. There's a yogic direct perception of selflessness that can occur, lower levels of selflessness, but that's not seeing emptiness directly at the path of seeing. One must know the emptiness of intrinsic existence of all phenomena to become an Arya, which is what happens when you reach the path of seeing. And as a Mahayanist, you become a first ground bodhisattva after you go through the path of uninterrupted path and path of release on the path of seeing. And then you come out of your meditative equipoise, and then you're on the first bodhisattva ground. So we shouldn't be lazy. We shouldn't think that we totally get emptiness. Especially if we haven't scoured, I mean, from the perspective of the studies, if we haven't scoured Illuminating the Thought by Lama Tsongkhapa and the Hlatong Chemo, if we haven't scoured the third volume in English of the end of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, and haven't scoured the Ripijatsa, the great, the ocean of wisdom, Lama Tsongkhapa's great commentary on the Muya Madhyamika Karika, if we haven't scoured that, and Leishi Nyingpo, this text that no one understands, the essence of eloquence. You know, if we haven't looked at if we can't just freely read these like they're just like a easy book, like if we can't just pick up the Leishi Nyingpo, right, the Lama Tsongkhapa's Essence of Eloquence, and just read through it like super easy, it means that we are not fully ready. We need to keep studying. We need to keep studying. And even when that occurs, if we still have attachment, according to the great Kadampa masters, we need to keep studying. We need to keep studying. So in order to know what the object of negation is and what it isn't, and how to understand that this non-affirming negative that the Buddha so kindly came to this world to tell us about, the emptiness of intrinsic existence of all phenomena, we have to study hard so we don't fall into any of the extremes, the extreme of nihilism or absolutism. And that middle, every one of the schools, Vaibhashika Sautrantika mind only, in both Madhyamaka schools say, you know, there's 3 Madhyamaka schools if you want. They all say they have the middle. And they have a reason why they're in the middle. We don't have time to get into it, but if you study tenets, every one of the schools says, no, we have the middle because of this. We have the middle because of that. But the Prasangika view is the one who really holds this middle that has no way to be negated. There's nothing to say against this middle. There's no comeback. There's no, well, what about that? When you really get to this middle, if you realize the emptiness of the object of negation, you realize emptiness. If you know the object of negation clearly, that's the first thing, is seeing the naturally appearing object of negation. So anyway, that's enough of just a little bit of talk about like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to get something done with our minds. We're trying to make this world a playground for becoming a Buddha. I say playground because we want joyous perseverance. We should have joy in doing this. This shouldn't be like, oh, I have to go do my meditation. This should be joyful because we've been given a gift to be able to achieve exactly what we've always wanted. Happiness that doesn't end, suffering that is never going to happen again, and a way to help everyone we love around us. And that will be everyone in the universe. We'll feel the same way about everyone in the universe that a mother does for her only child. And that's why we'll be able to have that experience we talk about when a child's born and the mother has that bliss. Well, the Buddha has that bliss 24/7 because the Buddha is always having as his or her object of observation a child, the childish, us childish folks. And the Buddha has to come, you know, in the child's game, the Buddha has to come in and play by the rules in the child's game to get the children to realize what they need to realize. So we're so lucky the Buddha has come to our world to do that. Okay. I'm so excited that we're getting into equalizing, exchanging self with others now, transitioning from the 7-point cause and effect practice that we studied for over a year. I wanted to really give an introduction today to just get us to remember how lucky we are and how we're among very, very few beings that have this opportunity to study this information. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once, the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature, form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, datu, up to no mind, datu, no datu, of dharmas, no mind, consciousness, datu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awakened to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, path of accumulation, the mantra of great insight, path of preparation, the unsurpassed mantra, the path of seeing, the unequaled mantra, the path of meditation, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, path of no more learning. Since there is no deception, the Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world, with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ah, if anybody's a sharp Bodhisattva out there, something happened. Something happened out there to somebody. That's the shortest perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Okay. Kala jupe ne jodamba ne nguje doju ngayi do jenju babalama yi bushin zi ne sung kandro so la sha zelo. Agha samara jandara samara beka samara jandara Agha samara jandara samara avede adon gati gati paragati parasangati buddhizo ababa gonja zonji gaye ne medoji she lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji jagi baji medoji she danji shenin korea zo ha gerin do jaji je shewa da medone bejan dandro wada Tumba Junjin Bonzon Joji Daji de John Denda de Lejo. A mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje Jodan Zodi Jodan La Janjo Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Drala Benje Zanje Druba Jo Sanje Jodan Zodi Jodan La Janjo Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Drala Benje Zanje Druba Jo Sanje Jodan Zodi Jodan La Janjo Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Drala Benje Zanje Druba Jo. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Let's read the source of all my good. If I lean forward, I see it's coming time. I'll have to do the puzzle piece. So the source of all my good by Lama Tsongkhapa. And of course, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to them in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow them with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I have died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then instead to strive for the happiness of liberation. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality, the Pradamoksha vows, the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Just like myself, bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Or just like myself, every living being my own mother has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way, the union of calm abiding and special insight. Grant that once I practice well the paths shared and become a vessel that's worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to keep them even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless me and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. We're so lucky, right? We're so fortunate to have these blessed instructions. So this evening, we're getting into the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. And you all know where I'm going to begin. Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. So let's look at the outline. So what is this training based on? The teachings of the Bodhisattva Shantideva, the conqueror's child. So conqueror's child, Bodhisattva, these mean the same thing, the conqueror's children. When we look at Bodhisattva Shantideva's text, it says, once you generate the awakening mind, aspirational bodhicitta, you become a child of the Sugata, child of the conqueror, child of the Buddha. This means you're a bodhisattva. You become this great being. So when we hear child of the conqueror, child of the Sugata, or something like this, child of the Buddha, these all mean the same thing. This means a bodhisattva. So once you generate this thing that we're learning how to generate, we're learning how to generate aspiring bodhicitta. As soon as you generate this, you then automatically you're called a bodhisattva. That's what you are. You're a bodhisattva from then on, as long as you don't lose your bodhicitta. And the window isn't big for losing your bodhicitta. So once you get to the medium level of the path of accumulation, you become a bodhisattva. You're on the small level of the path of accumulation. Once you get to the medium level, you won't lose your bodhicitta and fall to the lesser vehicle tradition, or the lesser motivated tradition. So it says this is based on the conqueror's child, Bodhisattva Shantideva. So we better figure out who that is. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do this evening. I think we have plenty of time. So this is a book called The Indian Buddhist Pundits, from the Jewel Garland of Buddhist History, Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. I've been told that this is from a Tibetan source that, there's so many different namtars. So let's be clear. So when you hear like a biography of a teacher, if you hear it a little differently, or if there's some nuances, don't say, oh, well, we heard in the book that Jeff read, this way the story was told, and there must be no other way to tell the story. A lot of this is an oral tradition passed down, and there could be nuanced differences, or beings who saw different things that were there. I mean, there were some beings who heard 100,000 verses at Rajagriha, some who heard, 24, 28,000, some heard right? So let's not be so attached to some story about history and the exact details. Let's just get the general principles to understand who this being was, what this being did, what was so amazing about this being, and it really will help us to motivate to want to be a great being like this being, and also allow us to see how to kind of loosen our minds around appearances. So Bodhisattva Shantideva, around 8th century, master. So why don't I read it? So Bodhisattva Shantideva. So whenever we use the names of masters, and we'll see it, it's kind of like in our English books, we just write like names like a scholar, like they're, oh, like Tsongkhapa or Shantideva or, Kamala Shila. But you'll notice that the Tibetan tradition, usually you'll say Lopun or Arya. Lopun means master. Lopun, Kamala Shila, or we would say the great abbot Chandarashita, or we would say Bodhisattva Shantideva. So there's always like a name of reverence put before the name, because it's not like Geshe Damdul always says, "Oh, is this your friend Milarepa, your buddy? You're just hanging out with Milarepa." No, it's Jetsun Milarepa, Lord Milarepa, Lord Gampopa. So just get in the habit of using these honorific terms for one reason and one reason only. So your mind is impacted to know that this is a holy name that in all of my lives I want to connect with. This isn't my neighbor, Bob. I'm not really, I want to help Bob as a Bodhi and become a Buddha, But in all my lives, who I really want to connect with are the beings that I tell my mind are special. And when I say Bodhisattva Shantideva, Acharya Shantideva, or I say Arya Sangha, or Acharya Vasubandhu, or I say Arya Vimuktasena, or Acharya Haribhadra, there's something different that happens in my mind. Master, Mahasiddhi Tilopa, Mahasiddhi Saraha. There's something different than just Saraha. It tells my mind there's something so special about these names that in all my lives, I want to leave these imprints of this is so special. Okay. Bodhisattva Shantideva was born in the town Saurashtra, north of Buddha Gaya. He was the son of King Kusalavarma and Queen Vajrayogini. From childhood, just like we name like dog, we say Queen Vajrayogini. These are just names. Maybe she was an emanation of Vajrayogini, but just whenever you hear names like this, it can become confusing, but just use it as a name. There may be more of a secret meaning to it, but just use it like that to kind of understand it. When you're reading Jetsun Milarepa's biography, it gets confusing a lot of times when you're reading all of these names with the honorific terms. So just try to kind of hold it and understand what the story is. So from childhood, the young prince Bodhisattva Shantideva, he was named Shantideva at birth. So here, this was his birth name, Shantideva. Displayed remarkable skill in the fields of knowledge. At the early age of 6, he met with a yogi from whom he received his first initiations and practices on the practice of Manjushri, teachings and practice on Manjushri. As a result of his engaging in this practice, he actually perceived Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, and received many teachings directly from him. So you see why we should probably say, even though his name was given Shantideva, he's 6 years old, like hanging out talking to Arya Manjushri. So we should probably say the great being Bodhisattva, incredible knowledge warrior, Shantideva. Okay. Prince Santa Varman was the heir to the throne. So when his father died, preparations were made for his coronation. On the eve of his enthronement, Manjushri appeared to him in a dream, and Manjushri was seated upon a royal throne and said, "This seat belongs to me. I am your teacher. It is inappropriate for both of us to sit upon the same throne." So he's having these visions at a young age, and he's going to be an heir to the throne. That same night, Tara also appeared to him in a dream, and in the form of his mother. She poured hot water over his head and said, "Kingship is like the hot water of the hells. Such is the situation that you are about to enter." When he awoke, he saw his impending kingship as a poisonous tree and hastily fled the kingdom. So Bodhisattva Shantideva would have been a king, just like Buddha Shakyamuni. 21 days after his escape, Bodhisattva Shantideva felt very thirsty and went in search of water. He found a spring in the middle of the forest, but just as he was about to drink, a girl appeared and warned him not to take the water because it was poisonous. She gave him pure water to quench his thirst and led him to a yogi who lived in the forest. This yogi empowered him and opened many doors of wisdom and concentration. The yogi was a manifestation of Manjushri, Arya Manjushri, and the girl a manifestation of Aryatara. When he left the forest, Bodhisattva Shantideva carried with him a wooden sword, which symbolized the wisdom of sword of Arya Manjushri. He journeyed to the kingdom of Panakamsima. The king of that country recognized Bodhisattva Shantideva as a man of great wisdom and of proficiency in all worldly fields of knowledge and appointed him as one of his ministers. Bodhisattva Shantideva actually accepted this position and during this term of office introduced the skills of various crafts into the kingdom. Although Bodhisattva Shantideva always performed his duties in accordance with the Dharma, another minister who was extremely jealous of him informed the king that Bodhisattva Shantideva was deceitful. The fact that Bodhisattva Shantideva's sword was made of wood, he claimed, was evidence of this, that he was a fake because he had a wood sword. In order to investigate this charge, the king ordered all the ministers to show their swords. Bodhisattva Shantideva warned the king that the sight of this sword would cause too much harm to even look at, but the king didn't believe him and insisted that he obey the royal command. In that case, he told the king, "Close your right eye and look only with your left." The king did as advised, and upon seeing the brilliant radiance of this wooden sword, his left eye fell out. Shantideva picked up the eye and pushed it back into the socket and healed it. The king realized that Bodhisattva Shantideva was in fact a great siddha, and faith rose in him. He made many offerings to Bodhisattva Shantideva and asked him to remain in his kingdom, but Bodhisattva Shantideva declined. He urged the king to rule his kingdom always in accordance with the Dharma and suggested that 20 Dharma foundations be established. Then Bodhisattva Shantideva left for the great monastic center of Nalanda. Yeah. At Nalanda, he received the ordination of a monk from the abbot Jayadeva, and was given the name Bodhisattva Shantideva. During his stay in Nalanda, he received many teachings from Arya Manjushri and realized all the important points of both Sutra and Tantra. By overcoming all internal and external distractions, he attained realizations of the highest stages of the path. But, everybody listening? Externally, it seemed that all he did was eat rice 5 times a day, not working or studying or meditating. Because of this, some of the monks named him Bu Su Gu, which means one who only eats, sleeps, and defecates. Rinpoche always found this funny. Having no powers of clairvoyance, they didn't know the extent of his realizations, and they gossiped among themselves, saying, oh, Shantideva. They wouldn't say Bodhisattva. They say, oh, Shantideva never engages any of the 3 activities prescribed for a monk. They're saying, oh, he's only eating and sleeping and pooping and peeing. He should be expelled from the monastery. But as it would have been difficult to have him expelled, they decided to publicly humiliate him so he would leave on his own accord. Their plan was to request each monk to recite the Pradamoksha Sutra, thinking that Shantideva would be unable to do this and thus would be shamed into leaving. Initially, Bodhisattva Shantideva refused their request, but they persisted. So he told them that he would do the recitation if they built him a throne to sit on. They agreed to this readily and built a very high throne without any steps, thinking that there'd be no way he could get onto it. So they're trying to, make him look silly. They're trying to make him feel bad about himself. Trying to make him they're being mean. They're being bullies. They're trying to bully Shantideva, Bodhisattva Shantideva, out of the monastery. But you know what? Someone with great compassion can't be bullied. Learn that. Someone with great compassion cannot be bullied. Fake compassion can be bullied. Great compassion, you can't be bullied. Yeah. When Bodhisattva Shantideva approached the high throne, so okay, they make this big throne. They think, oh, we're really going to see a funny show today. Oh, he's going to make a fool out of himself. What's this silly person who just eats and sleeps and defecates going to do today? This should be a good show. They didn't have TV. Yeah, so people who love to talk about others and gossip, they love to humiliate people and see people humiliated. Yeah, this is the kind of children's games that children play, right? So when Bodhisattva Shantideva approached the throne, he reached out one hand, pushed it down with his magical powers and ascended to it easily. Unperturbed, he asked the assembly if they wanted him to recite the sutra teaching, which had been previously recited, or something they'd never heard before. They answered that they'd like him to recite something they'd never heard before. So just imagine this. All of these bullies have gathered around, these so-called scholars have gathered around, who haven't written probably anything, because someone writing stuff that matters would be not doing this. So-called knowers, know-it-alls, not even having clairvoyance and being judges. Like us, right? Like us. Childish beings like us. Like us. So what does Bodhisattva Shantideva do? He's been called there to recite. He said, I'll come recite with the Pradamoksha Sutra with everyone. Just make sure I get a throne. So what is he about to do? He's going to recite something they've never heard before. What will he say? What will this silly, silly person they're thinking have to say? What did he have to say? He had to say the Bodhicharya Avatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. This is what he said. And he opened with, reverently I prostrate myself to the Sugatas who are endowed with the Dharmakaya as well as their noble sons, and to all who are worthy of veneration. And then he taught all of the chapters. When he reached the 9th chapter, which is about wisdom and which explains the profound view of emptiness, he ascended into the air. He went higher and higher, and his body disappeared from view, but his voice could still be heard clearly. Later, those who possess clairaudience and those who possess the dharani of perfect memory recorded Bodhisattva Shantideva's words. However, there were many discrepancies between the different versions. The version of Central India, Magda, contained 1,000 stanzas. The version of the eastern country of Bengal had less than 800 stanzas. It is said to have lacked the confession and wisdom chapters, and the Kashmiri version contained more than 1,000 stanzas, including the verses of salutation. It was uncertain which version was a correct record of everything that Bodhisattva Shantideva had said. Hearing that Bodhisattva Shantideva was residing at Sri Daksini Kalingpa, part of Trilinga, 3 Panditas went there to see him. They invited him to return with them to Nalanda, but Bodhisattva Shantideva declined. They asked him which version of the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara was the most accurate, since he had just done it from memory. So Bodhisattva Shantideva got on that throne and just, what this book we read, he just recited it, you know. And when they went back to his room, they found the compendium of trainings written, which contains a lot of sutra quotes. We won't get into that. It was the most, he said that they asked him which version was the most accurate, and he said the Mugda was the correct record of his words. They also asked him the whereabouts of the Siksa Mukaya text that he had previously advised them to study. He told them that they could be found on the shelf in his old house at Nalanda. That's the compendium of trainings. Then he proceeded to give them teachings on the 2 texts. In the same forest where Bodhisattva Shantideva was staying, there was a monastery of 500 monks. Some of these monks noticed animals entering Bodhisattva Shantideva's cave, but they did not see them come out again. So they suspected Bodhisattva Shantideva of killing them. But later, watching the cave carefully, they observed animals leaving in good health. Then they felt contrite for having harbored such negative thoughts about him. They asked Bodhisattva Shantideva to remain in the forest and teach, but he took off his monk's robes and went to South India, where he led the life of a wandering ascetic. Once, as Bodhisattva Shantideva was passing by a householder, threw his washing water out of the doorway. It fell on Bodhisattva Shantideva's feet and started boiling, just as water does when it drops on hot iron. The householder was startled and disconcerted by this strange event. About the same time, a non-Buddhist teacher named Sankha Karadeva wanted to challenge a Buddhist pandit, wanting to see King Kati Bidari, the ruler of his region. The conditions he proposed for the competition were that whoever was defeated should adopt the victor's doctrine and his places of worship, and would be destroyed. So this is a rule back in the olden days in Nalanda. And this is why, unless you were an incredible scholar, you couldn't leave the gates of Nalanda, because if you had to be converted, if you couldn't win the debate, whoever won the debate, the person who lost had to convert to that tradition. So the stakes were extremely high. So he asked the king to witness the contest. The king agreed and sent a messenger to inform the Buddhist community of the challenge. They replied that no Buddhist was prepared to accept this challenge, and King Kati Bidari felt very disheartened. Just then, the householder had thrown the water at Bodhisattva Shantideva's feet, arrived to relate this incident that had happened to the king, and asked who this mysterious ascetic could be. When the king had heard the householder's story, he immediately sent messengers in every direction to find the Buddhist ascetic. After a long search, Bodhisattva Shantideva was found sitting under a tree as a beggar. Bodhisattva Shantideva accepted the non-Buddhist challenge and asked to be supplied with a pot of water, some clothing, and a fire so that he could tidy himself for the event. A large crowd of people came to watch the debate. The contestants were seated on 2 thrones in the center. King Kati Bodhidara was seated to one side with his ministers on his left and the other pandits on his right. The debate began. It didn't take too long before Bodhisattva Shantideva defeated Sankaradeva. Then the non-Buddhist challenged his opponent to compete in a display of magic and proceeded to draw a huge Shiva mandala in the air. When Sankadeva had completed the eastern gate of the mandala, Bodhisattva Shantideva entered into the samadhi of destructive wind, and suddenly strong gale blew. The king, his ministers, and all the other spectators were blown over. The surrounding area was wrecked and covered with dust. Sampakaradeva, with his mandala, was carried up and tossed about like a bird in a fierce storm. Then the whole area became shrouded in darkness. Suddenly, Bodhisattva Shantideva shot out an intense ray of light from between his eyebrows, and the wind stopped. Instantly, everyone recovered from the ordeal, and the whole area became clean and utterly and orderly once more, like nothing had happened. To fulfill the conditions of the contest, non-Buddhist temples were closed, and many non-Buddhists embraced the Buddhist doctrine. The town in which the competition was held became known as the defeat of the non-Buddhists. I'm just reading the biography. I'm not trying to make statements about Buddhism versus non-Buddhism. We're studying Buddhism. I'm telling the story of Bodhisattva Shantideva. Once, when some non-Buddhist philosophers were experiencing difficulties with their means of livelihood, Bodhisattva Shantideva produced food through magical powers and gradually led them into the practice of the Buddha Dharma. So we see the 4 ways of gathering disciples: being generous, speaking nicely, and so forth, and giving the practices, practicing what you preach. You see, these great beings are following what we read, so we can become great beings. On another occasion, there was a famine and thousands of people were dying from starvation. Bodhisattva Shantideva saved their lives and gave them teachings which enabled them to lead a contented existence from then on. The Buddhas do not wash the negativities of water with water, nor do they remove miseries with their hands. The spiritual realizations are not transferred. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. So Buddha acts within the conventions of the world, plays the game in the world, but is only playing the game for one reason: for you to be able to figure out that samsara is just a playground to learn how to become a Buddha. Bodhisattva Shantideva enabled them to live a contented existence. In the eastern Aryabhoshana, there lived a king who had many evil people conspiring against him. Bodhisattva Shantideva helped the king avert this threat and led him and all his subjects into the path of goodness. Another time, he prevented a war. See, he's doing all of these things that seem like, oh, he's preventing wars. Oh, he's giving people food. But he's only using this as a skillful means to teach the truth of suchness. Another time, he prevented a war by expounding holy Dharma and showed the warring parties the true means to attain happiness. These are just a few examples of the many exalted deeds that Bodhisattva Shantideva, the great Bodhisattva, performed in his lifetime, and because of which he is revered as one of the greatest Indian masters of all time. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll get into what is this equalizing, exchanging self with others practice next week, where we learn. First, there's 9 steps. We learn, let's just list them, and then we'll do the dedication. We learn how to equalize self and others. We learn the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude. We learn the benefits of cherishing others. We learn how to take on the suffering of others in the light of compassion. We learn how to give happiness to others, which is love, which is in the light of this kindness, in the light of love. We learn how to actually exchange our needs for others' needs, how to do the actual exchange of self and others. We learn how to remember the great kindness of all sentient beings. And we learn how to actually develop altruism, the extraordinary attitude that we learned about in the 6th step of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then we have a resultant step, just like the 7-point cause and effect has a resultant step. This process where we say there's 9 steps, there are 8 causes and 1 result, the 9th being the result of bodhicitta. We're going to learn all about it, and we're going to spend a lot of time learning it, and we're going to look at all the different masters' commentaries, just like we did in terms of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, going from Buddha to the Indian Pandits, and then we've got a ton of Tibetan commentaries, the first and second Panchen Losang Chuji Jetsun, Panchen Losang Yeshe's commentaries, and all of the Dalai Lamas, the first Dalai Lama, the third Dalai Lama, the fifth Dalai Lama, the seventh Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai Lama. I have all the commentaries on Lojong that we can use to try to understand these things. And then Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. We'll look at the Parshin Shitun to try to get an understanding of what these practices are like and how they fit categorically under, the actual causes, the real specific, practices that cause these things, this mind of bodhicitta to occur. Okay. All right, let's do the dedication. I'm super happy to open the gate of the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice so that we can eventually open the door into the Mahayana. Because the only way we do that is to get bodhicitta. And the only way we get bodhicitta is to do the work we're doing, to have the wisdom arisen from hearing. And this is accurate information. This is complete information. So we then have to take this accurate, complete information and engage in an analysis, and then eventually have something that we've analyzed and discovered is correct to meditate upon, to actually transform our minds into a mind that would day and night, as we know, renunciation is defined as day and night seeking transcendent liberation in the three principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa. And bodhicitta would be day and night seeking Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandal to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra, imagining that white homes, red ahs, and blue homes are dissolving into you, coming from Vajrasattva, the space in front of you, and purifying your body, speech, and mind respectively. Om Benza Sata Samaya Manabalaya Benza Sata Zaina Bajita Dida Meva Zudugaya Meva Zubugaya Meva Anurag Meva Zavazini Meva Jazawa Kamazuchi Megidam Juan Guru Om Ha Bhagavan Zavada Gata Benza Memoga Benza Baba Mazamaya Zava Ombe. Jorama Jorama Jojorama Junja Kalaraja Morama Jadachi Junja Roda Hongjo. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Through this virtuous action, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead every being without exception into that enlightened state. In all my lives, may I never be separated from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. May the supreme bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase forevermore. May the supreme correct view that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase forevermore. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and health for beings, all powerful Chen Rezig, Tenzin Gyatso. May your life be secure for hundreds of kalpas. We're so fortunate to have His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in our world, breathing the same air we breathe, walking on the same earth that we breathe, giving these incredible teachings and connecting us to the Nalanda tradition. We're so fortunate to have this. And a prayer of supplication that I wrote to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, my root teacher. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The purity, rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, place the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atishu came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you kind habit arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound is stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negatives of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. Spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world, take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns, and may all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. As Jitsa Milarepa said, we can't look at a picture of food. We have to eat food. We can't just hear the Dharma, look at a book. We have to practice the Dharma. This information that I'm giving you, that was given to you, given to me so freely by my precious teachers, is to be practiced. It's not just to be heard and talked about so that we can sound fancy. It's to be integrated into our lives and smashed into our minds so that every moment eventually we can put a virtuous imprint into it, because we deserve this and we should be kind to ourselves. Thank you. See you later. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you.